Hello everyone, welcome to a short video lecture in respect of F8 Audit and Assurance and looking at June's 13 Examiner's Report. Okay, so the exam consisted of 5 questions. Question 1 was 30 marks, 2 was 10 marks and a further 3 questions of 20 marks each. The paper was 3 hours long with 15 minutes reading time, so therefore you should be able to divide your marks up in terms of timings, and it works out as 1.8 minutes per mark. But the performance of candidates across the paper was reasonable, but there were a number of challenging areas due to candidates perhaps not understanding core syllabus areas, lack of technical knowledge, and an important aspect, the failure to actually read the question. We'll come on to that later on. The vast majority of candidates actually attempted all 5 questions, but where questions were left unanswered, this was due to a lack of knowledge or poor exam technique as opposed to time pressure. Okay, so a number of common issues then. First one is failing to actually read the question, and this is a key aspect. A technique that I would perhaps employ is to read the requirement first of all, then read the main body of the question, therefore you have an understanding of what you're being asked. And this will give you an opportunity to actually brainstorm around the question and hopefully generate ideas. Poor time management has also been mentioned. Again, as I mentioned earlier in this video lecture, to look at to allocate your time at 1.8 minutes a mark, and hopefully that will let you allocate your time accordingly and sort of mitigate the time pressure. Failure to actually understand the requirement in terms of the verbs that have been used, such as describe or explain. So you need to again read the question carefully and maybe reiterate to yourself, what am I actually being asked here? Do I need to describe an instance, or do I need to explain a circumstance? And also then poor layout. Presentation is key in all examinations and gives the examiner an opportunity to read your answer legibly and to give a number of marks for presentation. Okay, so in terms of some specific comments regarding this paper, question 1, 30 mark question, and therefore you apply 1.8 minutes per mark to this question. Okay, and it tests the candidate's knowledge of communicating to those charged with governance, internal controls, application controls, and substantive procedures for banking cash. Okay, so part A1, 2 marks, and is to explain why it's important for auditors to communicate to those charged with governance. Part A2 required 3 matters that may be communicated. So the key differentiation between part A1 and part A2 was that of why it's important to communicate rather than what is being needed to communicate, because the what is needed to communicate was actually in part A2. So why it should be important to communicate with those charged with governance could be to build a relationship with management, to obtain additional information, or perhaps obtain additional audit evidence. In terms of part 2, this was actually answered quite better, which is emphasizing on the what needs to be reported, with some candidates looking at areas of fraud, material misstatement, and internal control deficiencies. Okay, so part B then required to look at a report to management which identified and explained 4 deficiencies. And again, there are those key words, identify and to explain, in terms of implications, and also to recommend rectifying circumstances in terms of each deficiencies. And therefore, you needed to do that in terms of a covering letter, and again, presentation aspect is key. This was actually well answered. Candidates were confidently able to identify 4 deficiencies from the scenario. However, what the poor part was, or what the bit that was unsatisfactory, was that candidates were not able to adequately explain the implication of the deficiency. However, what's important to note is that candidates need to think of these issues in a practical manner and apply the knowledge when answering these type of questions. So a common criticism of candidates by the examiner is that the core syllabus areas are not fully understood. So what I would say is certainly understand your core syllabus areas in depth and the theory in depth. However, where you get your additional marks will be the practical application of the theory. So therefore, it will be important to practice the exam style questions and put those ideas into practice, especially in terms of practical application. However, in terms of the requirement, it was well answered. And again, a point to note is presentation. So the examiner specifically mentioned a number of areas with presentation. For example, the use of a letterhead, introductory paragraph, a disclaimer, and actually a courteous sign-off, and 2 marks were given in respect of that. Another recommendation would be to set out your answer in a number of columns. And that would be, for example, deficiency, implication, and recommendation. Again, presentation is vital. So another interesting point is that the examiners pointed out is the requirement was for 4 deficiencies, and a significant proportion of candidates actually provided more than 4. And for example, 8 deficiency was provided. So therefore, that actually could be a waste of time, and it could actually give candidates a lot of time pressure for the rest of the paper. So again, answer the question that has been posed and look at your time management. Okay, so part C then. That was for 4 marks, and it was looking at application controls. The issue here is that performance of the question is quite unsatisfactory, and this was due to the fact that there was a lack of understanding of what application controls may be. And again, it wasn't actually specific to the question. The specific area was that in input in invoices, and you need to be specific in terms of both computerized controls and manual controls, such as check totals or existence checks, and actually explain what those concepts mean in terms of getting good marks in that question. Okay then, part D was for 7 marks and was to look at substantive procedures for bank and cash at the year end. And this was again quite unsatisfactory. Some candidates actually failed to read the question requirement, where it stated that we were looking at year-end cash and bank. So what do we need to look at in terms of auditing a bank reconciliation at the year-end? Well, some candidates did actually mention unrepresented checks and outstanding lodgements, which is good information. Also in terms of obtaining a bank confirmation letter and actually counting petty cash. Other aspects would be in terms of agreeing the bank reconciliation to the trial balance, getting an original bank statement and agreeing that balance to the bank reconciliation, and then also maybe adding up the bank reconciliation to ensure it actually talks correctly, what's called as cast the ledger. Okay, so that's a quick review of the examiner's report in terms of the introduction, general comments, and question 1 on the June 2012 F8 paper. So hopefully that will give you a number of pointers and hopefully give you guidance in terms of where to focus on in your studies for F8. So thanks for listening, and hopefully all the best in your studies.